Top Bed Talk.
So, my name's Hugh Montgomery. I'm Professor of Intensive Care Medicine at UCL, and I'm here at the State of the Art meeting, which is the Intensive Care Society's annual conference, and this is 2018. And I'm sitting here with Angela McNelly, who's a friend and colleague. And she's got a lot of expertise. So I'm going to start just by talking about debility. So, what do we do to our patients, Angela, when they come to ITU? Do they end up bounding out the door like spring chickens after a bit of intensive care, or do we render them a little bit more disabled than that?
Unfortunately, they leave the unit, and subsequently, when discharged from hospital, they have very significant functional issues. And what it means is that they can't go back to living the lives they were living before. This has a huge impact on them, on their families, a human impact and a financial impact on themselves and also on the NHS. And these patients are not necessarily old. They're in their late 50s, early 60s, average age ICU patient. And these issues can go on for decades.
Now, so when I was a youth, we always just thought, well, that's maybe because we've left the lungs a bit damaged or we've left the heart a bit damaged. But it's more than that, isn't it? What else is going on here that renders these people so debilitated?
It's a kind of complex picture. One of the aspects that our group think is particularly important is the fact that we've shown loss of an average of 18% muscle mass over the just a 10-day period.
Wow. So that's a fifth of the muscle mass disappearing on average. Right. So some people, that's an average. So 50% of people are worse than that. Is that right?
Yeah. So people are losing 25-30% of their muscle mass just in the first 10 days if they're particularly sick, so they've got multiple organs failing. And obviously that level of loss of muscle has a huge impact on what you can do. And as we all know, humans are designed for activity, and we need to be able to move to live and to live normal life. And it's a virtual circle when it goes right and a virtual vicious circle when it goes wrong. And for many of the patients, they're in a very difficult situation.
So, I mean, we know, of course, from that first paper that it was Zudin Puthacheri, of course, was first author on that paper, was showing that, of course, it wasn't just the reduction of muscle mass, that when you look at the protein in each myocyte, the protein levels have dropped even more dramatically. So the myocytes themselves aren't very good. So surely this is just a question of feeding, right? You just say, well, maintain the muscle mass by making sure we get a bit more nasogastric feed down a bit earlier. Isn't that right? I mean, or is that wrong?
Again, a more complex picture, and what that paper actually showed was that there was some indication that the more protein that was received, the greater the loss of muscle. And it's maybe links back to a biochemical phenomenon known as the muscle pull effect, which has shown in healthy individuals that having raised amino acids continuously doesn't result in more muscle synthesis. It actually it peaks and then it returns to baseline. So I think we have to kind of rethink the paradigm of continuous pump.
So of course we know that overnight we fast, we break down muscle, we eat breakfast, that's an anabolic stimulus, lots of amino acids go in, we build up a bit of muscle, then we fast and it breaks down a bit, and then we maybe walk to work and it goes up a bit, and then lunchtime. So these sorts of, we require what you're suggesting then is a dynamic stimulus.
Yeah.
And on ITU, I guess we're saying that we feed them continuously, enterally or parenterally, and that your muscle doesn't recognise a change, so
That's
it just
right.
stops taking up the amino acids. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the obvious answer then is why are we giving people why did we start giving people continuous feed? It's not very physiological, is it? Why aren't we giving them 3 meals a day?
I think in the 70s the technology became available that pumps were reliable, and it to be fair, it wasn't illogical that these people have a huge metabolic need, so let's give them a little bit of nutrition
continuously
all the time. Yeah.
So it's just partly easier, right? You could hang the bag up, switch the pump on, and okay.
Yeah.
And we don't think that, well, we're suggesting that might not be a good thing, or at least it might be as good just to give someone intermittent feeding.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've studied that, haven't you? Have you not just done a pilot study then?
We've just completed a randomised clinical trial comparing the effect on muscle mass of intermittent feed versus continuous feed.
Right, and who were these patients? Were they just any old ITU patients, or were they the sick ones?
They were the sick ones. They
Okay.
needed to have a SOFA score of at least 2, so with 2 or more organ systems failing. They needed to be recruited within 12 hours of their admission to ICU, so we were getting them really at the beginning and then following and then randomising them and giving them either intermittent or continuous.
And how many roughly were in each group then? How many got the continuous feed and how many got intermittent?
We had about 60 or so in each
Okay.
group.
And the intermittent was 3 times a day, 4 times a day?
No, it was 6 4-hourly feeds
Okay.
of a commercially available feed like Ensure Compact.
Yeah.
Safety and feasibility data showed that.
I was going to say, let's talk with the safety bit first, because you'll get a lot of people hearing this going, well, hang on, that's not going to work. They'll have massive residuals, they'll vomit and aspirate, it'll leak down their ET tube, glycemic control will be all over the place. I mean, did you have trouble with sugar control or vomiting, or no any signal for harm?
In a word, no.
Okay.
There were no feed-related adverse effects or serious adverse effects reported.
Okay, so this is a safe thing to do in the very sick people, which is good news. Any positives that come out from it, other than the fact you can do this and it's safe?
The nursing staff and the medics were happy and found it satisfactory in terms of actually providing the feed.
Right.
And in terms of was it feasible for the patients to receive the feed from a nutritional point of view, yes, it was.
And do you think this is going to be beneficial in any other ways? I mean, I'm thinking not just of muscle, we can talk about it in a minute, but also psychologically. We know that regular meals, as it were, are part of what helps train our day-night, keeps us orientated.
Yep.
So I could see that might be an advantage. So maybe there's going to be a signal of delirium, I don't know. What about the muscle side of things? Does giving, going back to your original hypothesis, does giving these people a burst of amino acids every 4 hours, do you think it might help preserve muscle mass compared to continuous?
Well, that was our hypothesis. We're still doing the analysis of the results.
Okay, so we'll hear about that next year.
Absolutely.
Very exciting.
But we've also looked at other outcomes. We have the nutritional.
Right.
So, will those patients receiving intermittent feed meet more of their nutritional requirements?
And why is that? Is that because we're not switching pumps off when people go to CT scans and things? Is that what's happening?
I'm not sure, really. But certainly there is no evidence for there being any negative impact on receipt or on meeting energy requirements, and we think there's likely to be a positive impact.
Now, given that we know for care of the elderly patients and stroke patients that intermittent feeding on ward seems to preserve muscle function better, so that should be probably a standard of care on the wards, should we now be extending your study to just say, look, it doesn't cause harm, even in the sick people, so actually even across the board people should just be getting bolus feed? Is that a logical extension?
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
From the analysis we've done so far, there has been absolutely no signal for harm in any way, and it's worth saying this is a costless intervention.
Right. Well, it could be cost saving, of course, in the
Yeah.
longer term. You'd have less pumps. I suppose the pump manufacturers might dislike you a little for this.
Well, less pumps and potentially less negative impacts on secondary outcomes such as length of stay and
Right.
A reduced infection rate. It's still under analysis, but certainly it's worth investigating.
So we'll follow the plot for next year's. Let me leave you with one question, which I like to ask everyone at the end of a talk, when the jury is still out on some other endpoints. If you hit intensive care tomorrow, heaven forbid, which one would you choose to have? Would you want continuous feed, or would you want intermittent feed for you personally?
Well, I'm a basic scientist, so I would always go with the science, and the science is telling us that intermittent feeding is more biologically plausible, it's more physiological. So I would choose intermittent feeding. Okay,
so it's safe, it's unlikely to be harmful, there's some trend towards the fact it might be beneficial, and that's what you'd have for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. Angela, Thank you very much for talking on Top
Med
Talks.
Pleasure.
Thanks for downloading and listening to Top Med Talk. Don't forget to find us on social media. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, even got our own YouTube channel. Whichever your favourite social media feed is, we're bound to be there. Find us. Also, subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. And make sure you go to the Top Med Talk website, topmedtalk.com, and get on board with the email updates. Oh, whilst you're at it as well, I suggest you download our entire back catalogue. We're categorising at the moment. We're having a little look through it. It may not always be in the form that you currently find it. So if you get your hard drive ready for a full-on download via the website perhaps, or perhaps through your podcatcher. Oh, and if you fancy meeting us, why not go to the website edpom.org/meetings. Our next big event is EdPom USA, the Dallas Masters Course, a perioperative care practicum. Have a look for details of that and some of the other meetings coming up across the next year. edpom.org/meetings.